And welcome back. Joining us for this conversation today is the Director General of the National Commission for Museum and Monuments, Professor Abba Tijani. Welcome to Lens in Africa, sir. It's a pleasure to have you once again.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Director General, sir, your tenure there has been marked with a lot of progress and a lot of achievements in the past few years for the Nigerian cultural sector. Tell us a bit about the journey and some of the major highlights and moments that you've had.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. The National Commission for Museums and Monuments, as we know, is the commission that is saddled with management of our museums, of our national museums across Nigeria, and our national monuments. By the time I came in as the Director General on the 1st of September 2020, I made a number of our museums across the country that are in a condition that one can say is not favorable to visitors. And I felt as a professional that there is a need for us to upgrade our exhibitions and renovate our museums to welcome our visitors. Yeah. And I was able to start, and the first year I was able to renovate and upgrade museums across the country, numbering 9, and then in the second year 8.
Not too bad.
And so we are also continuing with the upgrade and the renovation.
One of my favorites is the return of the Benin artifacts. Tell us about that journey.
Yes. So after this, because we have to locally, enable our audience to, visit museums as well, to make them welcoming. Yeah. But also at the international level, we are fortunate to be able to interact with our partners across the world that hold a number of Benin bronzes that were looted in the 1897 Benin punitive expedition by the British colonial, soldiers. And we were able to sign a number of agreements for the return of such artifacts. Such museums that we have been able to sign agreement include, all the public museums in Germany, and also a certain number of museums in the United Kingdom and the US. So we have been able to now repatriate some objects that are now in our museums in Nigeria.
Of course, they made the international headline. These were very important. All right, now to the topic of the day. Why are these museums, monuments, artifacts so important to the cultural, entertainment, and educational development of Africa?
Well, as you know, not only just in Africa and particularly in Nigeria, but worldwide, we always identify with, where we are coming from. It is very important for us to know our cultural heritage, our cultural identity, and where we belong to, because it's very important to know where you are from. Then you will respect your own identity and culture, and then the cultures of others. And that is why for any country, the first thing after independence is also to now identify, what is the national heritage, what do we subscribe to, what do we identify ourselves as different from other nations, from other countries. And I think these are our cultural, rich cultural heritage that can identify us that as different as, other human race. And that is why it is very important for us to safeguard our national heritage, our collections that tends to now tell us who we are, where we are coming from. And to do that, there's a need for us to have museums where we can keep this, our cultural heritage for people to go and see, for our generations to go and see, and also for visitors to come and see and understand about our tradition and about our past.
Right, so I'm going to push the questions a bit further. Quite a bit of your time, this is what you do professionally, quite a bit of time and resources were put down into tracking this artifact, relocating them, the bilateral negotiations, cross-country, cross-border negotiations, and eventually repatriating them back to our museum. They cost millions and millions and millions, sometimes in dollars, millions of dollars, to eventually get this back. Now, one would argue, okay, if you take that millions of dollars and we put it somewhere else, wouldn't it be more valuable? Why should we put that in the second? How can that, let's take the sectors one by one. We have education, we have entertainment. In entertainment, it's a bit easy. We can see what they've done with movies like the Black Panther and all of that. They've made billions, now not millions, billions of dollars from their cultural heritages. Let's start with how the Westerners make money from these artifacts. First of all, these artifacts were overseas. They were reluctant to release them because they were making quite a bit of money from them. How were they making money from them, and what can we do about that here now they're back home?
Well, the most important thing for us to understand is that when the West sees Africa, they see Africa as being backward technologically and all sort of things. And suddenly they came and discovered very rich, artifacts that are produced by Africans, that are of high quality, beyond their imagination, and now they are shocked, and that is why they now realize that there is really technological knowledge in Africa, and the people have very rich understanding of artistic disposition, and their artworks are so stylistic and so natural and also realistic that they assume that Africans cannot produce this. So that is why when they went with it, they were researching and finding out to see, and they are fascinated about this, and that is why our artifacts now assume certain priceless value that because of our background and being in Africa, and we don't have such advanced technology, and yet we produce such marvelous pieces of art. And for us, they are not art for art's sake. They are about our social life, about our religion, about our royalty, power, and so on. And so we consider them as being part of our life, our daily life.
All right.
And they see it as art piece. And that is why when they went now, they prize them. And when it comes back to your question as to saying, why can one invest in such, pieces of artifacts that are priceless? And let me ask you the question: can you sell your identity? Can you value your identity?
No, it has no price.
You understand? These are part of our identity, part of our history, our past. So we cannot negotiate about this. So that is why we have to preserve it, we have to cherish it, we have to respect it, and we have to also enable our younger generations to know where we are coming from, about our past and about our identity.
All right, two questions very quickly based on what you said. One, how can we use this artifact to convince the upcoming generation that we do not have to adopt everything that comes from the West, that we had generations, centuries ago, we had indigenous technology and society that was advanced, and that we have something to be proud of, and we can look at our own and evolve from within. How can we use this artifact to convince and talk to our young people and raise up a generation of people who are very proud to be African, who are independent in their thinking and can develop a civilization for themselves?
And that is why museums is central in this case, because that is where you go to see and to know about the past. So for them to understand about the past, they need to know now how technologically driven is the past. And that is why we have these artifacts in museums, and not only showcasing them as objects, but also giving the background, how they evolve, how they are produced, and how they are being used. And you can see the technology of the brasses, the bronzes. For example, we have the Igbo Uku, we have the Benin and Ife and the rest. And the Seer Purdue process of the lost wax process has been there, in Africa, in Nigeria, for thousands of years before it is known to the West. So these are the kind of things that we want our younger generation to see. And from there, they can also be technologically driven. They will have their own, way of now investigating on their own how they can innovate. That is the whole idea, because always the key thing is innovation. And if our younger ones are not driven by what our past generations have produced, they will always copy what the West produce. So that is the idea of having museums and having the history and the artifacts that are there to
as
tell
evidence
us,
of this history, that this history is
but
actually
we
true.
want to also make our museums technologically driven, because we don't want...
Let me pause. We will get there, and we will talk more about that in a few moments. But the next thing I want to talk about is the second part of the question, which is, these artifacts say something different about our history and our cultures than the popular narrative in the West, which we're a bunch of savages who needed salvation, redemption by evolution of our culture, and they came to help us that wise. Meanwhile, our history tell a completely different story. Like you said, the Iboko, the Benin, the Nok culture, they all show a clearly developed civilization that was advanced. I mean, the Benin artifacts were better than any bronze artifact anywhere in the world at that time. That was amazing. How can we use this artifact and the museums and our monument to change the narrative of our story all across the world and to ourselves as a people? First of all across the world, because when our people go there, the narrative is that, oh, you guys, I mean, we heard the story over and over again, how they ask if you're living in a hut and all those kind of things. How can we do that? How can the government take advantage now that this news is out there, these artifacts are being returned? How can we take advantage of it to change the narrative of our origin story in the West and beyond? Thank you.
That is the function now of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments, one of the functions. Of course, it's not easy to attract our young generations to museums, because they have been, for many years, we have low patronage from the younger generation, and that's because our museums are not welcoming. And when you go to museums, you not just go to see the objects, the artifacts, but you want to go there and interact with a lot of things, the environment itself,
the environment,
and also the people there. So that is why there is a lot of concentration of objects being placed in our museums for people to go and see, and it will becoming to be boring. So that's why we want to make our museums attractive and interactive, so that our younger ones can find a reason to go there. But also we need to understand in our narratives, what we present in the museums, to see that this is about our identity, and our people, generations of generations, have been living peacefully and also have been developing and innovating a lot of things.
So you're talking about using the art and artifacts to inspire the future.
Exactly. And that is why in the process of this repatriation, every time we go and negotiate and sign agreement for repatriation from these museums in the West, we now tell them that now we want the narratives to change at your end. We don't want the way you present our artifacts in your museums, the way you tell the stories is not what is tenable. So we want to change the narratives. We now want to involve our curators here so that they will take part in your exhibition and change the narratives, because they see these objects as a work of art only. But we want to tell them that they have functions, they have role in our daily life, and that should be reflected in the exhibition. And that is what we have been signing agreement with them, so that we will also change the narrative in the West as well, not only in Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much. Let me take you back to something you were talking about earlier on. You were talking about technology in our museums and monuments. How can we do that? How can we use technology to change the way people interact with the museum? What are your ideas? What's your thinking in this regard, so we can attract more of the younger generation and inspire a whole generation to do things differently?
Well, technology has now brought a lot of innovations, a lot of way to understand things around us. And one of the things for us in the museum is to see that, how do we enable access to our artifacts, not only physically in the museums, but also virtually. So that is why we have taken it upon us now to digitize our collections, because if you don't digitize the collections, there's no way you can now, you know, present it.
So we digitize the collections, good?
Exactly, we digitize them, and part of the agreements we are signing with the West in as part of the repatriation is to assist us in this digitization. So once we now digitize our collections, we'll now enable our audience to access our collections online, anywhere, on their handsets, on their computers, but also to have, you know, the stories, the narrations and everything along with those,
yes,
you know,
okay,
so that it can, and we thought that that will inspire them to also now want to visit the museum to see the real objects.
I think that would be fantastic. When you were speaking about the issue of the environment, I was thinking about the possibility of virtual reality. So I go to the museum and I could put on a virtual reality set and go back in time to a setting of what maybe the Nok civilization looked at the time, the Bini civilization ruled at the time, interact with the sounds, interact with the environment. It will be fantastic and phenomenal. Where is that in the plan anytime in the future?
In fact, we have produced a documentary now in partnership with one of our, you know, Africans in diaspora, Nigeria, that on the Nok, and that is already ready, and it's an educational, you know, documentary, so that they will now see how Nok was, you know, at that time. So that kind of documentary, and you know, we want to transform that into a kind of interactive, so that you'll be able to now ask questions, to touch and to feel and to, you know, see how things work in the past. That we are going to do. And to tell you also, we have a canoe, for example, which is the oldest in Africa, 8,000 years old.
8,000?
Yes, was excavated in Dufuna in Yobe State, which is still lying in a solution, a liquid solution, which is to preserve it, and we want to, you know, enable that people to have access to it, you know, virtually as well, because, you know, it's not easy to go and touch and feel this kind of objects, because
no, you can't.
So that's how we want to present some of our precious objects, because you know, when they go to museum, one of the things setback is that you cannot touch the objects. So you cannot feel it.
They are priceless.
So as part of this repatriation, we are producing replicas, copies, so that they will touch and feel. Yes.
Fantastic. Now we're out of time, so I'm going to say your last words on the issue of museums or monuments and artifacts, and how they can help improve the transmission of entertainment, education, and culture.
Well, we are partnering with a lot of you know, organizations, individuals, to see and that museum today is not only in the four walls of the museum, but museum reaches out to the communities, to the institutions, to our schools, to our younger generations, as part of educating our younger ones, as part of also making them to understand about our past, and also to create and to enable peaceful coexistence, because we are in a time when our younger ones are distracted by technologies, by impatience of a lot of societal ills and so on, and we thought that our artifacts can play a role in promoting unity and peaceful coexistence among our younger generations, and that we want to take it to the schools and to the communities and the stakeholders as well. And I call upon Nigerians and all stakeholders to please visit museums and see and understand about our past and about their culture and the cultures of others. By doing that, then they will respect the cultures of others as well.
Professor Abba Tijani, it's been amazing having you here. It's always beautiful listening to your insights of things that's regarding our culture, our history, our museums, and our monuments. And we look forward to seeing you again as we wish you well in your next endeavors.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
All right, then. Well.